or you want to learn a musical instrument, what do you do to get better? You practice. And, being mindful in relationship is about creating your relationship as a practice. So we're excited because every one of these sessions is in some way, shape, or form about building a practice for you and for us. And the beautiful thing about having Debbie and I, which is really kind of different, is that we're both therapists. We both practice. We both have a private practice. We also practice together, but we get to use our relationship as a laboratory for everything that we talk about, really trying to practice what we preach. And sometimes we fall short. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes
we mess it up.
Sometimes we mess it up. Sometimes we're like the plumber who has terrible pipes in his house.
And then, it's funny, in our individual sessions, we'll often bring those examples, those messing up examples, to our individual clients. Sometimes Craig will say to me, "Did you talk about me a lot today?"
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. We tell all the boo-boos that we make.
And we're doing the same thing here, and certainly we hope to, because I don't think we feel like we have all the answers, and I wish this format were a little bit easier to have more of a dialogue, because I think the richness is really there, and really by no means do we feel like we know it all. There's so much that we don't know, and every session that we have, every conversation we have, we feel that we learn a lot. And as in all of our sessions, we always invite you, the listeners, to call in, and if you have any particular issue that you want to deal with, that you can have like a back and forth conversation with us, we really, really invite that and encourage it, and hope that somebody will be brave enough, because it is a brave thing to do that online like this.
Definitely.
So,
Sarah, do you have anything you want to add before we get started? Any technological stuff people should know?
If you have any questions throughout the course of the call, you can either pop them in the chat box to everyone, or if you want to remain anonymous, just make sure you address it to me as the meeting host, and I will make sure that Craig and Debbie get to the question. So thank you.
And that's Sarah Hydrant.
How are we doing with people and time?
Yeah, it's 7:05. We've got 26 people on the call, so let's do it.
All right, so we're going to jump into the topic of the evening, and I want to again thank everybody for being here for the Mindful Couple. And this is Debbie, and I'm Craig. And we are really, really pleased to be talking about this topic tonight, which is very juicy. As you know, we're going to be talking about sexual intimacy. And the reason we want to talk about sexual intimacy is because somebody recommended that we do it. And we thought that's a good topic, something we should address. And also, we addressed, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, some of you who were with us, we addressed emotional intimacy. And so this is kind of the correlate to that. Just a couple of qualifiers that I want to make as we're talking about sex tonight is, one is that Debbie and I are not sex therapists. We are therapists. We do have private practice, and of course, sexual issues come up all the time in our practice. But we're not trained as sex therapists. It's important for us to let you know. And the other thing is that we're going to be talking in generalities tonight. We're going to be kind of talking about different things about sex, and I don't want anybody to take it as the truth. Everybody's different. Everybody's an individual. Everybody has their own needs and wants when it comes to sexuality. So we may be speaking about certain things. We may make certain points, and just know that we're kind of generalizing and not really pointing to a specific prescription for anybody in particular. Anything else you want to address?
No, I think we're excited to cover this particular topic because it is a common breakdown in relationships, because when we first meet our partners, there's a mystique, there's excitement, there's the unknown, and sexual tension and foreplay and activity is very natural most of the time. But what happens over time is, as familiarity sets in, the mystique and all of that, what made sex exciting, tends to dissipate. And we're left with the haunting question, can we bring it back? And how do we do that? And tonight we'll be talking about those two questions quite a bit.
Yeah,
I would imagine, because that's at the crux of a lot of it.
Yeah. A lot of the things we're going to be talking about tonight, and I'm not trying to market our book, but a lot of the
But it
things
is.
are in our book. So we'll be referring to the book tonight a little bit. We did address quite a few sexual tips in there. But we're going to do a kind of a question and answer format tonight. So Sarah has some questions that she's going to be asking. And then again, really, really helpful if you have questions, feel free to type them in and let us engage together as a community so we can address your personal needs and wants tonight.
Yeah, we had a few that came in that were private, and so she'll be asking those. But if you have any, just let her know if it's private or public, and we'll answer them all. So should we get started?
Yeah.
All right. So,
Yeah, it's 5 minutes after.
All right.
what's happening?
I don't know. Who's happening? Who is that?
Somebody's not muted.
I
That's
got
okay.
it.
Okay.
Okay, so for the first question, just to introduce the topic, I think a pretty common question. I want to talk to my partner about our sex life, but I don't feel comfortable broaching the conversation.
So
Right.
somebody wants to talk about their sex life, but doesn't feel comfortable broaching it.
Shall I jump in? All right. So of course this is a common dilemma, a common problem. Talking about sex is challenging because as a culture, as a society, we tend not to talk about sex. You know, I mean, I'm not going to do a history lesson here, but we come from a Victorian kind of a culture where sex was taboo. And so we're coming out of that for sure, but still at the same time, we still have the remnants of sex being kind of a taboo subject. You know, we'll talk to our friends about it, but not necessarily our partner, which is a little strange. But the idea of talking about sex, one has to begin by asking, why is it difficult to talk about sex? You know, what's getting in your way? We definitely want to have those conversations. They're really, really important because we know that a healthy sex life correlates very strongly with a healthy relationship. And a healthy sex life means being able to openly talk about sex, talk about it with each other, ask each other questions, have an open dialogue where you don't feel judged and you don't feel ashamed to bring up anything you want to bring up around sexual issues. But again, the question of why is it difficult if you're feeling it's difficult to have that conversation? What gets in the way? What's the fear? Is it the fear of being judged? Is it the fear of being shamed? Is it the fear of being not understood? Or is it just the fear of asking for your needs and wants to be met? And you're
Could
worried.
be all of those, right?
All of the above.
Right. And I think in relationships, we make up stories about it. Like, if I bring it up, then he will, or, you know, so we live in a story of where this is difficult. And I love the question, whoever asked it, because it's a courageous question. You know, we live in the unknowing of, you know, that conversation. I call it a missing conversation. We live in that missing conversation. And then the breakdowns happen around that. And so for somebody to like type in, I don't know how to bring it up, it's such a courageous move. And it's the beginning. It's the beginning. It's just asking the question, how do I do it?
Right.
So I love that.
You know, it's important when you're thinking about having these dialogues that, first of all, we understand that this is not the kind of conversation you want to have on the fly. It's not the kind of conversation you want to have over text. And it's not the kind of conversation you want to have when kids are around. You really need to create some intimate space, some quiet time for the two of you to have a sacred space, really, to have this very, very important conversation. So that's number one, is creating the space and the time. And also keep in mind, this is not one conversation. This should be, or could be potentially, an ongoing dialogue, especially once it opens up and the floodgates open and you start asking each other questions. So the first thing is set the stage for it, right? The next thing, of course, is deciding on what you want to ask. What are those important questions that you feel you want to dialogue about? You know, in our book, we have a whole list of questions to ask each other that I consider to be somewhat provocative, with no right or wrong answer. They're just interesting questions to be able to explore with each other. Esther Carell, take that list of questions I had.
Oh, it's,
May I have that list?
Right.
No?
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to share with you just a couple of questions that are kind of interesting. So
I'm laughing because I hide his nose.
What, what does sex mean to you? When do you feel most free in our relationship? How do you respond to sexual preferences and requests from me? How do you like to be touched? Do you make a distinction between making love and having sex? That's a great question, a distinction between making love and having sex. My mother, can I be a little provocative here? I remember I was 12 years old and I asked my mother, what's fucking? And she said to me, well, there's a difference between fucking and making love. And she explained the two of them to me in her perspective. And it was great. It was great for me to understand that there's different ways to approach sex. So asking the right questions, and of course, you know, expressing how you want your needs to be met is very important. And so once the dialogue opens up, it's just endless, you know. And again, we have a whole list of interesting questions in the book.
Yeah, but I think if somebody comes to me and says, I really want to talk about our sex life, it has, like, how I'm going to respond to that question is going to depend upon the energy behind the question. So if I approach the question of, like, we can't even have a conversation about sex. Like, I feel so uncomfortable, you make it uncomfortable. In other words, the energy of blame. So if I come from that energy, then I can only anticipate that my partner, rightly so, will become defensive and hide around a wall, or maybe he comes at me. So the energy that you want to ask that question and bring up so you can have all these wonderful conversations is the energy of love and vulnerability. Like, I care so much about you. I care so much about us. I want us to have the sex life that resembles more when we met, because I love you so much and I'm longing for that. And can we have that conversation? How do we get back there? That's a beautiful conversation.
That actually is a perfect segue into a question that came in while you were speaking, which is that routine is great for raising kids and supporting the family unit, but how do you stay mindful about infusing erotic energy into a marriage during the years?
Great question. So how do you stay mindful about infusing erotic energy into the relationship during many, many years? You want me to take a stab at it first, or do you want to?
Doesn't matter.
All right, I'll go first.
Wait, you went first last time.
Okay, you go first. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just say a couple words on that. And that is, is conundrum the right word?
Sure.
It's a dilemma, because when we meet and there's all this erotic energy and then we become more familiar, the erotic energy tends to go out the door. And why is that? It's because the familiarity doesn't really breed eroticism. And Esther Perel, I think, is such a wonderful articulator of why. And one of the things that she talks about is that eroticism requires some distance, some separation, some space. And when we become, as she refers to, as too cozy with each other, it's beautiful and it fills our needs for connection and stability and love, but not necessarily for longing and eroticism. So when we become a little bit too cozy, too close, that eroticism tends to go out. So the question that this person's bringing up is a great one. How do we bring it back? And so the answer lies in creating some separation, some infusing some mystery. And as a hypnotherapist, one of the things that I know is the power of the imagination. And I always say that the imagination gets us into trouble because we imagine all these worst case scenarios. We have these thoughts and our imagination goes crazy. Our sex life sucks. You know, we'll never get it back. But the imagination is really the pathway into a more erotic life. Imagining what we don't know, because the reality is we don't know our spouse completely. Like, I look at this guy and I think, I know him, he's my husband, I know, you know, but the reality is he can change his mind about anything overnight. And I don't know that. And I don't need to know that, but that space of knowing and not knowing is an erotic one. I think the other thing too is that when we choose to see our partner in a new space, doing what they love and engaged with life, that's a very erotic space. You know, so like with Craig, he loves to play the flute. And when I see him playing the flute, I have two choices of ways to looking at it. One is it's erotic. You know, he's out there doing what he loves, and it's sensual, and this is a part of him that I don't really connect with every day. And the other one is, oh, he's playing his flute, he's got his little recital, I've got things to do. So I always have a choice through my imagination how I choose to look at him.
Yeah.
So that's my initial 2
That's
cents.
excellent.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I got my flute right here. But I agree with everything Debbie said. I would put quotes around this idea of taking risks and bringing mystery into the relationship. I think so many of us, everything becomes like white bread. You know, we're doing the same thing all the time. Basically, it's the same routine. After a while, especially after a few years together, we just basically kind of just, you know, we lose interest. We start taking each other for granted. And that's a normal sort of, you know, breakdown that happens because, let's face it, when we first meet each other, there's nothing like it. It's amazing. You know, it could last a year or two if you're lucky, but it's powerful. The oxytocin is going crazy, you know, that cuddle hormone, the dopamine is going wild. Your neurotransmitters are taking off. It's like a drug when you first meet, and it's amazing and it's wonderful. But over time, that does change, and we move into a different stage of the relationship. So it is quite challenging to be able to infuse the relationship with this mystery, with this sense of eroticism that everybody longs for, everybody wants. So, you know, the big question that I have oftentimes is, can I be erotic? Do I understand my own eroticism? Am I able to tune in and tap in to my own sexuality? You know, and I'm really talking about the energy of eroticism. You know, am I owning it? Am I experiencing it? And then I can begin to bring it into my relationship. So first, you got to own it. You got to want it. And the idea behind eroticism, part of the idea is desire. I have to desire you. I have to want you. And I want you to want me.
Oh, isn't I want you?
I want you to want me.
But you're right. It is rooted in desire, and I think one of the biggest breakdowns in relationships is that it's again one of responsibility. So if there's a breakdown in desire and eroticism, I always look to you and what you're doing to make that a breakdown. And it's just a chronic problem is that we don't look to ourselves. So what am I doing that's breaking down eroticism? What am I doing that's getting in the way of my own desire? And, you know, a lot of times, you know, when we ask couples that in therapy, you know, what are you doing to break down desire and eroticism within the space between you? And, you know, you get things like, well, let's ask, can we open up the lines? Can we just ask? And if you can type in, what are things that you individually do to erode desire and eroticism? Is it the cell phone? What is it? So just type into the chat, and if we get some, maybe Sarah can type them out. And if we don't get any, I'll just tell you what we are in therapy. It's probably the same thing. But the point here is that we get in our own way, and we're always looking to the other one and what they're doing.
I was thinking again, I don't know, my mother's just coming up crazy today. I went to the graveside yesterday for Mother's Day, so maybe her energy is around. But, you know, she used to tell me that you need to keep the mystique. The mystique is very, very important. So she used to tell me that, you know, for example, wearing a negligee, even though you're going to be taking it right off, right? But wearing it anyway as you come into the bedroom, it keeps a certain mystique around the whole experience. So that's really important. The other thing, of course, is taking risks. And taking risks is not as complicated as one would think, but it does require some effort. For example, if you're always doing the same position, you're going to want to try a new position. It's a risk, perhaps, to say to your partner, you know what? Let's do something a little bit different tonight. Why don't we try this position or that position? So, you know, these are some ways that I think you infuse the relationship with a little bit more mystique and mystery and it doesn't fall flat. What would you say? Anything
I'd
else?
say that, and like again, if you think about imagination, right? So fantasy is just a fabulous way to infuse space between us and eroticism. So we have a deck of cards. Do we have them around here?
They're in the
So-
front side. No.
They're in the
Yeah,
other room.
I can
Okay.
grab them, but
But they're great cards. And you just pick one up and it says, tonight you will be the pirate and whatever. And you just like play it out. And you don't have, if that one doesn't appeal to you, you can find another one. But some of them are really silly, but to another person, they might be completely erotic. And some of them are just fantastic. And so that's a fun thing to do.
We have
So-
some themes coming in around the question you asked, Debbie, the
Okay.
prompt. So
Uh-huh.
depression, I think sometimes I don't manage my emotional energy as well as I should, and then I don't have as much emotional and sexual capital left over for my partner, as well as work, are all barriers.
Yeah, so that I'm guessing that that's a male. And
It's a few different people.
a few different people. Okay, so what happens, I think, and I'd love your opinion, but my opinion, what I see is that like a lot of men don't want to burden their woman with all the stress that, I don't mean to sound so sexist on this because it could go by both ways, but I see it more with men, is that I'm out there to hunt and gather and do all this work, and I'm not supposed to burden my wife with that. She doesn't need to know all that. My dad was a lot like that. And so I weigh it on my own shoulders. But part of intimacy is to be able to share that, is to be able to open and to be vulnerable and say, something at work really scared me. And what scared me was whatever. And it's not a dumping grounds, but it's a sharing. It's like opening the kimono and saying, this was going on with me. And when I choose to be more vulnerable and really share the innermost worries at my heart, and then I open myself up emotionally. When I open up myself emotionally, I can open up myself physically. Because if I stuff all my emotions, then I'm also stuffing love and joy and eroticism and connection. You can't stuff one without stuffing the other.
yeah, one could argue that emotional transparency, emotional intimacy will help with physical intimacy. So they both go hand in hand. I think another angle to this question that I would say is that not all sex is equal. I mean, sometimes sex is going to be great, and sometimes it's going to be average, and sometimes it's not going to be great at all. I mean, I've heard statistics that about 5 to 15% of sex isn't very good of the time that you have it. So, we have to set our expectations and understand that it can't always be, mind-blowing experience. So, okay, sex is okay as well, I would say, and if you're feeling depressed or if you're feeling stressed, as Debbie's saying, transparency around that is good, because oftentimes feeling depressed or feeling totally stressed out is going to have a negative impact on your sexuality. So it is important to just know that, and maybe, it's not a good time for sex, but sharing that.
How would you address not being present?
Great question for being mindful, right? This is a beautiful question in so many ways, right? I mean, being present is so important when we're involved sexually. This is the most intimate experience as human beings, I think, that we can have. Two naked bodies with each other, next to each other, holding each other, kissing each other. There's nothing more incredible than that. And so being mindful during that time becomes sort of sine qua non with being in a great intimate relationship. You can't have mindlessness and have great sex, because then it's just about you. So how do you be mindful? I mean, and that's, not a 2-second question. Being mindful is what the whole world is talking about today. More than any other topic, mindfulness has become like the question that people are asking, how to be mindful.
Well, I don't know if the question is like if she's not present or I'm not present, but I think it's like the same question that I get a lot with people who are trying to meditate for the first time. It's like I'm really, really trying to be present, but my mind just keeps wandering and I just keep following it and I don't know how to get back and I feel like I should. And I feel like sex should be this beautiful present experience and I just can't do it. And that's what I refer to as a state of resistance. So the more I resist it, the more it's going to just stay around because I'm making myself wrong for being there. But if I just allow it, so let's say you're having sex and you're together and you're just thinking, God, I can't be present. My mind is back at the office. Then it is a meditative process. It's like, okay, so I'm not present. It's okay. Like be kind to that part of you that's really not there because the physical part of you is, and the mind can catch up to the physical part. If you just allow yourself the space to not fully be present, give yourself a little bit of acceptance for not being there. And then you're going to notice, okay, so I'm not present. It's okay. It's okay. I'm not present. Makes sense. I'm not present. Wait a second. Wow. Look at, I'm coming back to being present. Wow. Oh, wait a second. There I'm worrying about whatever. I'm gone again. It's okay. Allow yourself to go there. And then you're going to notice yourself coming back.
Good answer.
Yeah.
So we've got some great questions in the queue coming in.
Okay.
The first one is timing is a way of eroding eroticism, such as after dinner or getting too late into the night where the partner has to get up and go to work early. Not enough time to really explore the fantasy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Night is not your friend all the time. I mean, the statistics show that our libido is up earlier in the day, not late at night, for all those reasons that you beautifully displayed. But, so you have to plan around it, so maybe your time is before you go to work, or maybe your time is on the weekends when you're both home, or maybe your time is before you have dinner. So I would definitely plan around the realities of your energy levels. For us, I mean, sometimes we'll just plan on it like tonight, and then the reality is like, oh, I don't think that's going to happen. So you have to like be realistic about what's going on with you, and then, plan for a better time.
For me, I don't know if this is getting at the question exactly, but for me, it has to do also with the amount of energy that we spend on all the other things that are going on in our lives, especially if you have children. It can be really chaotic. We're, working, we're raising children, we have, to clean the house, we have to do the food shopping, we have to do the cooking, there's a lot going on. And it sort of raises the question of, with all this going on, how do we even make time to have sex? Because oftentimes what happens is we try to squeeze it in somewhere, and oftentimes we don't. And I don't know if you've heard this phenomenon of sexless couples, but there's more couples not having sex than ever before. I mean, they're calling them sexless couples. And there's a TED Talk on it that's real interesting. So the question of how do we create space to have time to make love? And I'm going to throw out a concept now that I think a lot of people kind of have a problem with. It's a little provocative, but I'm a firm believer in scheduling sex. And I know I get a lot of pushback, especially from guys who tell me it should always be spontaneous and it should be, just something that occurs. It should be natural. It should just happen. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's a myth, because it doesn't, especially under the circumstances that we're talking about. So then the question becomes, to me, is it better to have no sex or scheduled sex?
Okay, I just have to.
And before, one last thing. What, am I pushing the boundary here?
No.
I want to say one other.
No, I was just going to say, it's like, of course you like scheduled sex.
No, but one
because
other.
you like to schedule everything.
I do, it's true. I am totally interested.
You're in your sweet spot.
But here's the thing. Look, everybody schedules everything, right? I mean, think about what you put in your calendar. You go to a doctor's appointment, it's in your calendar. You go out to lunch with your friends, you put it in your calendar. why not schedule sex? And,
Well-
and don't you think there's some benefits to
No,
it?
I do. Okay, so we're both Jewish, and in the Jewish religion, there's what we call a mitzvah or a commandment, and that is you have sex on Shabbat, which is for us Friday night, and it ends Saturday night. And so we thought, well, maybe we should do that. Wouldn't that be kind of cool? Like, let's just do that mitzvah. We don't do many of the other ones because we're not really religious, but that kind of makes sense. Like, let's make sure we have sex at least on Shabbat.
You came into play for a reason, I'm sure.
Right. Well, the reason that it came into being is because in Judaism, we believe that the sages believe how important it is for the couple to remain connected. And they recognize that, the toll that, raising a family, and back then, going out, life was difficult. And they really, really wanted and believe in the unity of the couple, particularly sexually. And so that's why that's a commandment. And it makes so much sense because even in our lives, they may not be on the surface as difficult, but certainly it's stressful. So we thought, okay, so let's do it. I'm up for it. I mean, I'm not the big schedule girl, but I'll do it. And we did it. And I was kind of rolling my eyes, but I thought, let's just try it. So it's turned out to be a wonderful thing. And why surprised me, and I don't know about you, but like knowing that we're going to do that. We have such a commitment. No matter what's going on, we're doing it. And it was surprising to me that the times that you don't want to, but we've made this commitment, it's like a beautiful thing because, wow, we did it. And then we've maintained this continuity of a physical connection. But forget that for a second. Like when we have that continuity anyhow, when we know we've got Friday night, like we know it, like nothing's getting in the way of it, then, or it could be Saturday, then we have the opportunity to make it special, to plan for it, to put some candles around, some music. Sometimes I take the lead, sometimes he takes the lead, but we know that that's sacred to us, that space on Shabbat.
Friday morning comes around, and I know that Friday night is the night, so I always remind her in the morning, tonight's Shabbat. And then, it's true. I mean, it's like foreplay. It's like
It
it's like a 24-hour foreplay. You're kind of like preparing. There's things you can do.
He'll text me, it's Shabbat.
Text a little note. She'll take a shower. So there's.
I normally don't.
There is some special. There are some really special things to say about scheduling sex. And the thing about scheduling sex, like I said,
it's not your only sex.
It's
just
not
that
my
you know
only.
that
It's just
that's gonna happen.
that it's going to happen, and that allows for more spontaneous sex, I believe, because at least you're in that realm. You're doing it on a regular basis, and for older couples like us, and for couples who've been married for a long time, this is a major issue. I can't tell you how many couples I meet who haven't had sex starts out with 2 weeks, then it becomes a month, then it becomes 2 months, then it becomes 6 months.
And everybody feels guilty and bad. They're making up stories left, right, and center.
Yes.
And the disconnection just keeps rupturing.
So big deal.
So we've got another question, 2 more actually. My partner finds darkness and lingerie much more erotic than blatant nudity and having the lights on. It seems like it could possibly have to do with being self-conscious. Should I try and help her overcome this? If so, how?
Oh, that's a great question.
Darkness, and what was the other thing?
Oh, the lights out versus the lights on.
The lights out, and what was the other thing?
It was lingerie, much more erotic than blatant nudity and lights on.
She likes lingerie and the lights off. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to speak to that first?
Well, I mean, as a woman, I can kind of speak to it because, I've got issues with historically and probably even now, right? Like, I look at my body and I think, oh God, I wish I was 10 pounds, 20 pounds thinner. And so when it comes to sex, it's like, okay, can you turn the lights down? It's a little bright in here, And so I totally relate to the question and the preference. And I'm lucky enough to be married to a man who continually, when I say something, can you turn the lights down? Or, he sees me walking by and I'll kind of like cover myself up. And he's always saying, I love your body. you've got the most amazing body. And whether or not he believes it or not, it lands for me. I really, really appreciate it. And so I would say, if I were him, to continue, if you're not already, like reassuring her that she's got a beautiful body and no matter what it looks like to her, you love it. And that's erotic. And that will fuel her desire. It will make her feel more comfortable. And if having the lights on and having a nude body is important to you, you're on your way there. And I would just take baby steps and make it feel safe and ensure her that you're desiring her.
Yeah. And sometimes the bed may not be the place to explore full nudity. It could be in another room of the house.
What's wrong with the bed?
Well, I was thinking about, sometimes beginning to expose yourself fully naked might be a little bit easier in a different scenario. I was just thinking about dancing. I know that may not be it for this person, but I know for me, it's a little bit more fun and silly.
I don't know. The bed has covers. I'm going with the bed.
Right. Oh,
I
okay.
don't know.
The other,
But you have tried different
yeah,
things.
yeah. I'll go with Debbie's answer.
Okay, next question. How do we manage conflict when a partner has fantasies that I can't fulfill?
So the question is so interesting because it assumes there's conflict because so this one person saying, I've got a fantasy of this, and the other person saying, but I don't feel comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this natural conflict, right?
So, it's no different than working out any conflict, really. I mean, Debbie and I believe that conflict is an extraordinary opportunity to grow and evolve as a couple. We like conflict. We thrive on conflict. We talk it through. So, we've been talking a lot about how to resolve conflict, and there's a lot of different strategies. The one we like the most is to set aside some time and to allow your partner to express their concerns, their frustrations, their worry, their fear, whatever it is, and for you to be in full listening mode, 100% listening mode, where you're not commenting, you're not giving your opinion,
Just listening.
you're not trying to interrupt, you're not trying to be, give them a different point of view. You're fully listening, and that's so critical for emotional intimacy. So that is where the breakdown is occurring. It's not the fact that he will and you won't, or she won't and you. It's how you resolve it. And in the end, you'd be surprised if you work through we use mirroring, validating, and empathizing. It's in our book, and a lot of people, if you go online, look up the dialogue, you'll see it. Mirroring, validating, empathizing. You do those three pieces, your partner is going to be fully heard, and they might even change their mind.
They might even change their mind. A lot of times it's a safety issue. And, if it's something that she knows is going to bring you great pleasure, and she's felt really listened to, all her concerns and whatever, there may be, possibly, a part of her that would be more enticed to experiment a little bit in that direction, knowing that you're going to be really turned on by that.
Right. She'll do it for you, not because she necessarily.
But she's not going to do it if she feels safe.
Right.
Unsafe.
And speaking of safety, and it's a big risk for a lot of people to push the edge, especially if we grew up in families where that was certainly not encouraged and maybe even, pushed down. And I've heard, there's so many issues around why a person would not feel comfortable going there. We have to respect that.
Right. And sometimes it's baby steps, so if you want to go, to New York and she's sitting in California and says, I'll go to Northern California, but I'm not going to New York, then go to Northern California with her and explore that, be present with that. Yeah. And then maybe move on to, maybe move to Nevada. What do you think about Nevada? Right. And not in a manipulative way, like she's going to say, oh, you're trying to get me to New York. I know what's going on. But I want to explore our relationship and our desire and increase the connection and the desire.
And that's a good way to frame it with her. you know,
Yeah.
giving her a framework to say,
That's
I'm
ultimately
just
it.
trying to increase our desire and our intimacy because I love you and I care about us and I want our sex life to be great.
I can let go of New York if we're just like more connected and more desirous of each other. And I think that's probably the truth.
Another question here. How do you advise people who grew up in a very religious home where sex was a sinful and dirty thing? I feel like I have come a really long way in recovering my sexuality from that harmful dogma, but would just love to know what your thoughts are about creating a positive relationship with sex.
We get that a lot. And I'd love to hear from the person who's asking the question that they've come a long way. You know, that they've done a lot of work. And because what that says is I'm defining for myself. We all are raised in homes, whether they're religious or not, with certain values. But we believe that the purpose in life is really to differentiate and to grow beyond our upbringing and to question what we had. Is that really what we want? Or do we want to make it different? That's growth, that's maturity, that's beautiful. And I think that's the purpose of life. And so embedded in the question is the implication that that's already happened. And so I would say you're on the right track and just really questioning, who am I and what do I want and what's good for me, independent of all the programming that I got. As well intended as it was delivered to me. It may not be of me.
Yeah, and along with that, it's easy to fall into blaming and shame, you know, our parents or our religion, you know, and pointing the finger.
Right.
So, and that's just a negative rabbit hole to go down. So
Keeps it connected to it.
And it does. So, you know, as long as you're moving forward without resentment towards the old as you approach the new you.
Right.
Because you're creating a new you.
Yeah.
And you're letting go of the old you.
Right.
And that's a beautiful thing, as Debbie says.
It's actually just the opposite, right? It's like I'm letting go of it with love.
With love.
Like, I love you. You did your best. You gave me what you felt was best.
Yeah.
And now it's time for me to pick and choose what I want.
It's brave.
But thank you and I love you.
Yeah, it's courageous and it's brave.
Beautiful.
So we've got another question here. What if your partner wants to have a threesome, but you don't want to?
Ha.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, you know, it's almost like a boundary issue because there's a lot of areas where our partner wants us to do something, and I'm pretty in the camp of do it. You know, like, for example, I gave the example earlier. Let's say you're not one to mix it up with different positions and your partner is, and you don't really want to. I say stretch and do it, you know, or you don't feel like having sex one night, but your partner really wants to. You have a relatively good relationship going on. I say do it, you know, but a threesome, that's pushing into a whole nother area, you know? And so I would never say just because your partner wants to do it with something like that, unless you truly felt that that was something in you that you felt comfortable with. I wouldn't do it necessarily for my partner. It could, I think there's erotic pleasures and experiences that could be had from that if one is open to that. But for me, it takes sex for me to a purely physical level. And for me, there's so much involved emotionally when you're having sexual intimacy. Intimacy is what we're talking about tonight with your partner, that to remove that piece and just make it a physical action, for me, would be detrimental. It wouldn't help my relationship any. Right. So that's kind of my own, and that's a personal preference. I'm not putting it down.
Yeah. I think for me, the question is similar to what I was saying before. Like, we're living in California and I want to take us to New York, and she doesn't want to go to New York. And so if I force her or coerce her or manipulate her to go to New York, because I really believe New York is what I want, and I think if she experiences New York, she's going to like it, then that's probably going to backfire on me. But if I listen to her concerns about New York, if I listen to what she values about California, And if she listens to me, like, what is so important about New York? I love you so much. And I want you to be happy. I want us to be happy. And I'm curious, what is it about New York that entices you so much? And I'm not comfortable going to New York now, but you're telling me that it's restaurants and nightlife. And I like restaurants and nightlife, but I don't want to go all the way to New York to have it. Can we start in Nevada? And I may say Nevada's enough for me. Is that going to be okay? Can we make that okay? So it's the conversation, you know, and it's baby steps.
How do you feel though about a threesome in general? Do you have any opinions about
Well, that would be my personal opinion. You want my personal opinion? I think I could see the eroticism in it because, you know, we talk about eroticism being the unknown. And if let's say we had a threesome and there was another woman there, I don't know you with another woman. You know, I don't know what that looks like. And so that could be very erotic. My concern with threesomes is that if you were the one asking for it, that you would become addicted to it. And somehow my fear would be that we would lose the beautiful connection that we have. And I wouldn't want to be, this is my personal, I wouldn't want to be one of those people that have to be in a threesome to have satisfying sex. But if it were a one-off and it were really important, I would certainly explore it with you.
Thank you.
So we've got another question here, and I think this goes back to the intimacy you were talking about. Does making love always have to be intercourse?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely not. I think we short shrift foreplay tremendously. You know, I mean, making love can take the form of kissing, holding each other, cuddling. You know, there's so many ways to be physically intimate with each other. And I think that, you know, the whole idea of intercourse being the goal or the end result is just a trap.
It is a trap. I think it's a good way to put
Yeah, I mean, we really want to learn how to explore each other's bodies and explore each other's how to touch each other, where you like to be touched, how you like to be touched. And actually, I think that every month or so, couples should have a sexual intimacy session without intercourse, just to be able to play with each other and enjoy each other's bodies in a very different way without that being the goal or the end result. So yeah, there's so many ways to have sex without intercourse.
I think you can do it just with your eyes, right?
Sure.
It's just,
definitely.
yeah. There's a big territory there.
It's very erotic, certainly, where you can look at each other.
Do we have
any other things? We're getting close to the end here.
How are we doing on time?
It's 7:50.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So we really made a promise to end these sessions because we know certain people, you know, have to move on to different other Zoom sessions. So, and dinner and kids and all that stuff. So we really want to honor our commitment to ending a little bit late. So thank you again so much for being here. This is a fun topic. And I want to say that of all the sessions we've had, I know a lot of you are repeat, this has been the most participative, and we really, really appreciate you guys calling out and asking questions. We even got a bunch that we're going to answer personally because we didn't get to all of them. But I think probably embedded in some of the questions that you guys asked, the answers are there. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. And any suggestions for next week, we got this from you guys. So next week, whatever, you know, you guys have suggestions on, we're listening.
And if you want the list of questions, they're in this book, The Mindful Couple. And if you don't want to get the book, I can send you the list of questions. So please just email me and let me know.
So stay curious, look at your partner through new eyes, enjoy. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks. Bye, guys. There's Joe.
Oh, there's Joe. I didn't know you were there. Can you unmute?
I can unmute.
Hi,
Hi,
Joe.
Joe.
How are you guys? Great session.
I wanted to give you a plug. I didn't know you were there.